Chapter 4 Tucky and Other Friends. Some of my favorite memories take me back to my preschool years. One summer, after I had just gone to bed, I heard a commotion on the road in front of our house in Scituate. I heard a truck drive up and stop. Then I heard Dad shouting my name. "Come out here, Tommy. I have something to show you," he called. I heard Mom telling Dad that I was probably asleep, but by this time I had found my slippers and robe and was on my way to the porch. Dad had one of his bowling friends with him, and they were both laughing. I walked into the street, and Dad guided me to a metal ramp leading onto the truck. "Go on, son. Get into the truck," said Dad. I walked up the ramp, and the first thing I felt was the hay on the floor of the truck bed. But I could smell an animal. I reached out my hands and felt a warm, shimmering flank. My hands moved up and down the back of the animal until I touched a wool covering. I kept moving my hands forward until I reached his silk-soft ears. "It's a horse," I shouted. "Almost right," said Dad. "It's a pony, and it's all yours, Tommy." Since I had never seen a horse, I was puzzled by the blanket covering his body and asked a silly question. "Why is his shirt hanging out?" I asked. Dad and his friend roared with laughter before they realized that to a blind 10-year-old it was not such a funny question. I was too excited to notice. "I'm going to call him Tucky because his shirt needs tucking in," I said, and Tucky he became from that day on. I begged to go for a ride at once. Dad put a western saddle on Tucky's back and led me around the block. Then Tucky was led into our backyard and tied up for the night. I was too excited to sleep, so I asked if I could sleep in Peggy's room. There I could smell my new friend and listen to him whinny. Next morning, the news of Tucky's arrival traveled fast, and all the gang came over to see him. They helped me brush him down, and we made a small stable out of the tool shed. Now I was king of the block. None of the other children had a pony, and all of them wanted to go for a ride. "You've got to look after Tucky," warned my father. "That means you've got to feed him regularly, and you'll have to work out some way to pay for his hay." I did not know it at the time, but Dad was determined even then to make me independent and to realize, as he put it, that dollars don't grow on trees. To earn the money for Tucky's food, I started charging my friends a dime for a ride. Any of my friends who could not afford a dime was allowed a ride if he helped me clean the stable. I collected enough dimes to buy Tucky his dinner, but once when he broke loose and ate up a neighbor's garden flowers, I had to pay for those too. My father was a practical joker and sometimes drank too much. One evening, he borrowed Tucky to go to a meeting of the Scituate Beast Association. The mayor was there, and so were all the civic-minded townspeople. Dad arrived late, and having had too much to drink, rode Tucky right into the town hall. The mayor was astonished and banged his gavel and called for order. Dad stood up in the stirrups to dismount. However, the saddle strap was loose, and he slipped slowly under Tucky's belly. Laughter roared through the crowd, but there were some people at the meeting who didn't think this performance was funny at all. They protested to the police because there was a town ordinance that prohibited the keeping of horses within the municipal boundaries. Next day, when the police came around to our house to tell us that Tucky had to go, Dad telephoned a friend who was the city editor of a Boston newspaper. A reporter and photographer arrived shortly, and the next edition of the newspaper carried a big heartthrob story with pictures about a small blind boy who was going to be deprived of his pony by the heartless city fathers of Scituate. Many people wrote letters to the editor, and others held meetings to defend Tucky's right to stay in the town. As there was a town election coming up, the city fathers changed their minds and allowed Tucky to stay. But Tucky had to behave in such a way as to prove he had earned the privilege of being the only pony in Scituate. His chance came on Labor Day. Dad and I had entered him in the Labor Day parade. Dad had bought a small cart, and Tucky, festooned with ribbons, proudly pulled the cart loaded with 4 crippled children. The parade marked the end of the summer vacation, and the question was raised as to what to do with Tucky when we returned to West Roxbury. I hated the thought of leaving him behind. Suddenly, an idea occurred to me. "I know what to do," I told Dad. "Let's give Tucky and the pony cart to the Home for Crippled Children." And that is what we did. For many years, and until he was sent to a ranch in his old age, Tucky and his cart gave great joy to many children who had lost the use of their legs. Back in West Roxbury, I missed Tucky, but there I had another gang of friends, the Grayton Road Gang. I had grown to love animals, and one of the things we did as a gang was to collect stray or injured cats and dogs. We would house them in my family's garage until we found the owners. We started in a small way, but the garage soon became a miniature zoo. My closest friend, Billy Hannon, brought in birds with broken wings, and we built special cages for them so that they would not be eaten by the cats. Because my sense of touch was highly developed, I was often able to find out what was wrong with the birds and other animals more easily than my friends who could see. I would tell Billy, "This bird has a broken wing. I can feel the bone." Then between us, we would gently bind the wing to the side of the bird and give the wing time to mend. Not all of the animals recovered from our first aid, but most of them did. At one time, the garage contained 18 cats, 4 dogs, 6 birds, 2 squirrels, 5 turtles, a snake, and a monkey that Dad had brought from Venezuela. The animals often made a terrible noise at night, especially the cats, and the odor wasn't improving any. Once again, the townspeople complained. This time, a newspaper story about a little blind boy's animal sanctuary did not help to prevent the authorities from closing down my homemade zoo. Mom and Dad did allow me to keep one dog called Pal. He was a real delinquent and often sneaked down to the delicatessen on the corner. He would steal bologna sausages, knock ice cream cones out of the hands of small children, and knock over garbage cans. One day when Dad was in the delicatessen, the owner chased Pal outside and said to Dad, "If I ever find the owner of that dog, I'll sue him for a fortune." After that, I had to keep Pal in our yard. During those years, Dad owned a nightclub in an old 4-story building. Only the first 2 floors were used for the club, and our Grayton Road Gang was allowed to use the upper floors to play. We made them our gang headquarters and built our own gym there. In bad weather, it was there that we played basketball. We set up a boxing ring, and Tussie Russell, a retired professional middleweight contender, taught us how to box. Of course, I was the most popular opponent among my friends because I could never see a straight left to my chin. I boxed by flailing my arms like the sails of a windmill. I guess I looked a lot more dangerous than I was. One day, though, I did manage to hit Tussie Russell. I think the old fellow must have been looking the other way and was caught off balance. Anyway, Tussie hit the canvas, and I was given a cheer because no other member of the Grayton Road Gang had been able to knock him down. Of course, it was not all holidays for me. Like every other boy, I went to school, not to the neighborhood school with Billy and my other friends, but to a special school for the blind. One day, a few years earlier, I had come in from playing to find a lady, Miss Kelly, waiting to see me. I did not know who Miss Kelly was, but she asked me to sit at the dinner table and play a game with her. I didn't want to play because I had a boil on my buttock, which hurt when I sat down. But I sat because my parents were insistent. Miss Kelly produced about 20 small wooden blocks and invited me to make squares, circles, and triangles. This seemed a tame and silly game, but because the boil was hurting, I made the shapes as quickly as possible. Then Miss Kelly recited about a dozen numbers and asked me to repeat them, first forward and then backward. I did not find that game difficult either. As I was only 6 years old at the time, I did not understand that Miss Kelly was giving me an IQ test. When she had finished the tests, I overheard her telling my mother that my scores were that of a genius. I thought a genius was probably a friend of the genie that appeared when Aladdin rubbed his magic lamp. Anyway, my doing well on the IQ tests resulted in my being placed in an advanced class at the Perkins School for the Blind in Watertown, Massachusetts. It is a famous school, and the best known of the students who have gone there is Helen Keller, who was both deaf and blind. Like every other child, I didn't want to go to school. If I had known that Miss Kelly's games were a sort of entrance examination, I am sure I would have flunked every test on purpose. After Miss Kelly had left, Dad said he would cure my boil with an old Irish remedy he had learned from his grandmother. He filled a bottle with boiling water, sealing off the neck with a square of tinfoil. Then, turning me upside down across his knees, he placed the top of the bottle over the boil and slipped the tinfoil out. My screams were heard by Billy down the street. But, curiously enough, I have never had another boil, so I guess the painful Irish remedy worked. "Never mind," said Dad when I had stopped screaming. "I've got a surprise for you. You are going to a special school where they will teach you how to read with your fingers and to play special games invented for blind children." I started to protest again. I don't want to learn to read. I can listen to the stories on the radio and to the ones Grandma tells. I like the games I play with Billy and the Turnbull twins. "You can come home every weekend," Dad said, reassuringly. But that was the worst thing he could have said, because until then, I had not understood that I would actually have to leave home and stay in a strange room. That night, I cried myself to sleep, but all my tears did not stop my parents' plan to send me away to the Perkins School, where I was to discover a whole new world.